So let's kind of segue that into another funding issue, and that is salary increases for city employees. The city used to have staggered terms on all the union contracts.
Correct.
And now they've got them all lined so that they all expire at the same time, they all renew at the same time. But over the years, the unions have been very good at saying, well, they got a 5% pay raise, so we should get a 5% pay raise. And they got one, so we get one. And so now, like this year, although it did not take place, but it was scheduled to, it didn't take place because of the COVID. But all three unions, police, fire, and rank and file city employees, were all due to get 5% pay raises. Well, I'm not saying that's a bad thing, but then the PERS donations
Correct.
Go up, and I call them donations, not contributions. Sorry. Those go up, and now just the cost of employee and the benefits go up, cost of benefits. And so, this year's budget was set for 80% of the budget to be spent on employee costs. Well, we haven't had a property tax increase in Mesquite since 2004.
Right.
So we're getting kind of tapped out here between the cost of employees continually increasing. Something's going to have to give. We're either going to lose services. We're going to, do something with at least reducing the amount of employee costs, or our taxes are going to go up.
Okay.
How about it?
So, first and foremost, I am adamantly against a property tax increase. I think one of the things that brings business and residents to Mesquite is that we are the lowest property tax. We have the lowest property tax in Clark County, and I've been intimately involved in the budgeting process for the last 7 years.
Yes.
As I look at the budget, I don't think we need a tax increase. I think we just need to use our resources more wisely. When we talk about
In what way?
So when we talk about how much is going to employees, what I'll say there, Barb, is that because of the collective, the public employee unions that we have in the state of Nevada, that is not an unusual proportion to spend on employees. With that said, I think that we can enter, and council has the obligation, and I think, councils change, right? It depends on the majority. I think it depends on the leadership and the ideas that the mayor's providing to the council. I think that we need to spend responsibly. We need to ensure that our employees, that the city employees, are fairly compensated. They should be fairly compensated. I agree with that 100%. I was a full-time city employee for 5 years. With that said, we need to make sure that the compensation package at City Hall makes sense for everyone. And not to get too into the weeds on this, but as the union, as the chief negotiator for the city and all of our union contracts over the last 7 years, I know a thing or two about this.
Yeah.
Right. And one of the major problems that we see is it seems like we're always kind of behind the 8 ball. So what happens is we have these, if you look back 5-6 years and look at management salaries at City Hall, they were much lower than they are today. Well, our collective our employee unions came in and said, hey, we need pay raises. And as council looked at that, council determined those pay raises were ultimately warranted. My job in that was simply to be a negotiator, a go-between, and represent council's interests. When those pay raises occurred, well, then we had to raise the management pay, or council, the city said, hey, well, we got to raise management pay because otherwise we're going to have rank and file employees making more than managers.
Which is not always a bad thing, but no.
Well, hey, no, let me be clear. Let me, because you raised a good point. That happens places. When you're talking about pay scales, when you've got an employee who's been somewhere for 25 or 30 years and you hire in some new department head who has 4 years of experience or 7 years of experience, Sometimes those rank and file employees in a public union step scale system, the military, right, is a good example. You may not be making, your top out may be higher than what the starting point is for the manager that's overseeing you. We need to just look at smart ways of organizing our employee pay. We need a permanent solution on this. Those that have been to budget hearings in the many past years, you hear over and over, we have management salary compression issues. We have salary compression issues. What we've never done in the last 8 years that I've been here is figure out a solution to that. We've never resolved it. We've talked about it every single year. I don't think we get anywhere. We move the needle on any permanent solution as to employee pay and the pending, which we will see in the next few years, budget crunch on employee pay and benefits, unless we fix and have a universal solution. So though my focus is on mostly on the exterior, on the economic development, affordable housing, education components, I'm gonna, as mayor, I think there's an obligation to provide leadership to the council, to work with the council, to then in turn work with the city manager to oversee those issues. And that is our form of government. Our form of government is that the manager oversees those day-to-day operations. So that's a problem that we need to have a manager, and I'm good friends with Aaron Baker. I know Aaron well. I think Aaron's up to this task. That can bring those solutions to council. But council has to ask for them and has to hold the manager to task on what those solutions would be.
Well, that is a great segue into my next topic, and that is, actually, you were very instrumental a few years ago in passing a city charter.
Correct.
Kind of revising, and correct me if I'm using layman terms, not lawyer terms.
No, hey, you know your stuff.
Kind of, evolved from a regular city into a city charter, which changed a lot of the way that the city government runs, and the council and the mayor.
Yeah.
And the mayor's role changed significantly under that charter, if I'm not mistaken.
It did. You're absolutely right.
Okay. So explain to us exactly what the mayor does now.
Yeah. Thank you for that question.
I mean, what do you do?
Right. No, thank you for that.
If you're elected.
Yes. So I think there's two roles that the mayor has. I think first and foremost, and I've said this out on the campaign trail and talked about it, but before I say that, let me explain under the charter what the duties of the mayor are.
Okay.
The mayor presides over council meetings. The mayor, in cases of emergency, becomes the chief executive officer. That's one of the big changes we made. Under our old form of government, under our general law city, we actually had a strong mayor form of government, which made the mayor the chief executive officer of the city. Now, we've always had a city manager. We've always functioned, at least since I've been here, practically as a council manager form of government, but that was not what we had. So we changed that. When I drafted that charter, we said, hey, a council manager form of government makes a lot more sense for our community. So the mayor presides over council meetings. The mayor has the power to veto. The mayor becomes the chief executive in cases of emergency. Those are the, broadly speaking, the duties, the statutory duties of the mayor. And the mayor is also the ceremonial figurehead of the city, right? So, which doesn't mean much. What I believe that means in layman's terms is, number one, provide policy ideas and leadership. So what that is I don't get a vote at council meeting, but I get to be the community member that gets to participate in council meetings and preside over those meetings. So if I have ideas that come, community-based ideas, we can put those on the council agenda for discussion. I can argue for support for those ideas. I can attempt to persuade council from the dais. I can say, hey, this is good for Mesquite. On other proposals, I can say, I don't think this is good for Mesquite. This is an area where I may exercise the veto power. And I get to do that on behalf of the community and working with the community. I think that's one important point. I think point number two is to be the city's biggest cheerleader. And I think I've already done that. I go to the legislature and I argue with people all the time. Mesquite's the best community in the state of Nevada. I really, truly believe that. I think it is because of our energy costs, it is because of our water costs, it is because of the community and the developmental abilities that we have here. We can do so much here. And by the way, it's just a gorgeous valley. We're attracting people from all over the country to come into this valley. And there are many reasons for that. So So that's what I think the mayor does. I think it's to get out, be public, sell mesquite, make sure people understand what it is, but then also be a vigorous defender for it as part of that cheerleader. Be a vigorous defender, and that's what I do for a living. And I think
Yeah.
I'm set, ready to do that.
Okay. And that's going to kind of, you're doing a great job on segues for me. One other issue that is actually a very personal issue
Yeah.
is I have been covering the city from a news reporter's standpoint since 2007. And I see so many times over the years where it seems like the city of Mesquite simply hasn't bothered or chose not to put pressure on the county or the state to provide us resources that are available to us if we would just go get them. And, I get so frustrated because, 2/3 of the county commission doesn't even know that Mesquite is in Nevada. They think county line or the state line ends, at Apex. The state, forgets that we're here. And I think one of the things that really brought this back to me in my brain was the pickleball court complex cost or funding.
Yeah.
I don't want to argue the good and the bad of the pickleball court
Yeah.
complex because I think that's done over. I like the idea, but that's not. It's an example
Yeah.
of how I never heard any discussion whatsoever in the whole time that the council was discussing funding. They talked about going for the RDA money. They talked about the community block grant money. They talked about borrowing from one fund and paying it back from another fund and so on and so forth. Not once did I ever hear anybody say, hey, maybe we ought to go to the county and get some of their recreational funds because we are in Clark County. The state of Nevada gives out $1 million a year in tourism dollars. They talked about how this pickleball court complex would bring in tourists. Not one single word about going to the state and asking for some of that money. And I see how the state distributes that tourism money.
Yeah. Yeah.
Why don't we go to the county and the state more often to get those things that we are entitled to?
Listen, Barb, I wish this would have been your first question. I hope people are watching this one because this is one of.
Okay, before you get into the
Yes.
answer, we're gonna switch the tape
Okay,
here.
sounds good.